It's creating lecture topics for me faster than I can lecture. The world is changing in our favor, and we don't seem to know it. We're losing some ground and don't know why we are losing it. We're gaining ground and don't know how to consolidate it. And principally because we have gone away from the subject for tonight. We have lost the art and the drive to be an African people. And you cannot be another people and rescue yourself while imitating another people. You have to understand what happened to you as you entered what Professor Van Sertima refers to as the 500-year room. The European, as I have said before, not only began to colonize the world, he began to colonize information about the world, and he began to control images. But the most successful thing he did from his point of view, and the most tragic thing he did from his point of view, he colonized the image of God. And he started you on a tragic journey where so many of us worship everything white, from a white God to white bread. For many of us get a picture fixed in our mind, for we worship white Jesuses over the weekend and plead to a white boss for economic survival the rest of the week, and wonder why we lack respect for our black father, our black lover, our black uncle. If he changed the images around to show himself in power and got people imitating him, then you cannot be your African self, because you've been transformed into someone else's culture container, and you are reacting to being away from the culture that produced you in the first place. And you don't look back enough in Africa to understand that there were no rape cases in Africa, no teenage pregnancy in Africa, no prostitution in Africa, and no Africans worshiping a God that the Africans did not sanction. The spirit of a people is reflected in their approach to salvation through a deity of their choosing. I am not talking about changing God. I'm talking about changing God concepts, changing approaches. If you go to Japan and look at Buddha, he's Japanese. Indonesia, he's Indonesian. China, he's Chinese. They're all Buddhists. But Buddha looks like the local people in each case. All right, now, let me seem to be talking away from the subject for a few minutes. Let's look at the case in China. Let's look at the case of the Chinese attack on African students, calling them black devils. Then let's look at the case of the Chinese students confronting their own government and demanding democracy without understanding they got more democracy than the people they're imitating. Creating statues of liberty, imitations of the Statue of Liberty, and quoting Abraham Lincoln, who was a racist, assuming that there's some democracy here, without understanding how the nation was fashioned in this country for free white Protestant males, middle class and up, those who agreed with the prevailing political status quo and who owned property. When they said liberty and justice for all, that was the all. They didn't even mean white women. So if someone's going to turn to America as their inspiration for democracy, they're turning to a bad example. On our way over, Reverend Brown and I were discussing just democracy, and he picked out the case of the Chinese troops. The Chinese troops hadn't shot anybody. And some of them, refused to hurt these kids. That's their cousins and their uncles and their nephews. They got some humanity. Over here, they knocked the living hell out of you. A state trooper would take the butt of his gun and make you wish you'd never been born. And he don't care about you being his cousin. He said, get the hell out of this pocket. You gonna get out of there. You put a bayonet in your behind. They got more democracy in China than they will ever have over here. Now, are these people crazy? Have they read their own literature? Confucius had more to say about democracy and humanity and manhood and womanhood than Thomas Jefferson. Let them go back to their own writers. And when a people lose themselves and become so enthusiastic about things that belong to other people, they become the captives of those other people. And the Chinese are forgetting something. Not too many years ago, there was a foreign settlement in China, in Shanghai. The Chinese couldn't even touch a foreigner. The foreigners had their own police force, their own courts. There were hotels in Shanghai where the only Chinese woman who could go into the hotels, the cleaning woman and a whore. And there were signs on the hotels saying Chinese and dogs not allowed. What in the hell do they think they're talking about? They want American-style democracy. I don't want American-style democracy. I would trade for theirs with all its drawbacks. I would take any kind of democracy if it's on it. And this is the trap we're getting ourselves into. We think we can buy a piece of somebody else's pie. We don't know the cook who baked the pie. And we don't know the pie may be poisoned. Bake your own pie. Design your own government. Look at Africa. There's not a single African government in all Africa, and this is why the African Revolution went wrong. Not a single African government dared to come into being using African methodology, using an African system of government. Going back into African history and see the African democratic form. Now let's go back and pick up an example. During the reign in ancient Ghana of a king called Tenkabenin, the lowest person in the kingdom could petition his king. He would petition through the council, and the council was duty bound to take his complaint to the king. And if enough people of his status complained about the king, the council had to recommend the abdication of the king. And the king couldn't do about it. Could do nothing about it. This is a monarchy, and yet it was democratic. And this is why Ten Comedian was known as the king who rode out twice a day, every day. He would ride out among his people and administer justice. And anybody who wanted to talk to the king could approach the king and did not have to move from his presence until he was sure that justice had been done in his case. He would ride out again in the evening in splendid regalia, dogs with gold collars, horses dressed better than the then kings of Europe, men of the mat, men with silk and brocade mats, just in case the horse want to take a nap, to lay down the mat so the horse can rest a while. Splendor at its best, controlling the gold country, fabulously rich, and the people shared in the riches. The assumption is that a monarchy cannot also be democratic. When we go back and look at these African farms, we don't need to turn to the West for democratic farms. We had these farms. And we had communal living before someone invented communism. We had social living before someone invented socialism. But when it's coming from Europe, because of our European fascination, we think it has to be good because it came from them. We have not looked deeply at what was taken from us, because we have not looked at the great river civilizations of Africa. Now, this is a great concern for a lot of people, but because of our number in the world and how we are dispersed in the world, we're supposed to be winning. Some of the great wealth in the world is in our hands. 98% of the gold, the gem diamonds, comes out of Africa. The bulk of the gold comes out of Africa. Most of the cobalt comes out of Africa. Manganese out of Africa. 2/3 of the copper in the world comes out of Africa. Great deal of the zinc and the lead in the world comes out of Africa. If we united African people all over the world, we could close down American industry. And if we develop a good agriculture as we had before, our people could be fed indefinitely, and we could eat indefinitely, and we could go to school indefinitely, and say that if you don't want to pay my price for my goods, then I'll keep it. And they tell you, eat it. We don't have to eat it. We got corn. We got pigs. We got everything. We got cattle. We got sheep. We got goats. Our people going to eat whether we sell it or not. We're like a person in a card game who's got all the high cards and failed to put the cards down. All right. Someone has sent me a book that they've been working on a number of years. I didn't think he'd quite bring it off. It's called Why We Lose. Jake Beeson of Minnesota, Indiana. He has addressed himself to the question, but inasmuch there's so many of us in the world, so strategically located, why are we losing? And why are smaller people winning? And why are we losing in the face of that? And we need to ask some critical questions. With all the things in our hands, with all the resources that can be made available to us, why are we losing? I think we're looking at ourselves in the wrong way. And we're asking the wrong things from each other. Farrakhan wants a separate state in Africa.